Hey there, drone fans. Rick here again from Drone Valley. I'm here today to do a clip on maybe the most important topic I've covered to date. It has to do with the safety of your drone and the safety of the public. And I've titled it The 3 Quickest Ways to Kill Your Drone on Purpose because I wanted to draw a lot of attention to the systems inside the drone that may fail, that would be catastrophic failures, and bring that drone from 300 feet in the air to the ground in a matter of seconds. Now, I know a lot of the manufacturers are working hard on building in safeguards to the drone. So for example, DJI, which I'll focus on in this clip, in the Phantom 4 has built in tons of intelligence. So it's got features and systems in there that'll build in redundancy so that if you try to do something dumb, it'll protect you from doing something dumb. So for example, the crash avoidance system, which is great, will actually see objects in front of it and sort of to the sides. It's got a fairly wide view. And if you're approaching a tree or approaching a wall, it'll stop you before you run into it. If you try to get through too tight a space, it'll make a determination if you can fit through there, and it'll pull you back if you can't. So that's wonderful. You're going to crash a lot less because of that. It's also got geofencing built in, which means if you're putting a drone up and you're not really checking before you fly and you try to fly into a restricted airspace, it'll land the drone. Or if you try to take off in a restricted airspace, it'll actually stop you from taking off. So it's protecting you from sort of violating some policies that are out there today. It has battery protection built in. So I know you don't do this, but if you're flying the drone and you're not paying attention to your battery levels and you get excited and you fly out really, really far, if you get to the point of no return where it doesn't have enough power to get back, the drone will measure that and it'll know that you're out too far. It'll actually stop the flight and fly back and land the drone. Now, if you've been flying the P4 for a while, you know all these features are built in. I think they're wonderful, and I love the fact that DJI is thinking through sort of what could cause problems for most flyers and building in systems and redundancies to take care of that. What I worry about, though, as an engineer is, what about the stuff they haven't focused on, the single points of failure inside that drone, that if one of these systems fails, that drone can't fly. So what I've done is talk to a lot of pilots. I fly with a lot of friends that are pilots. Every time there's a crash, I'll talk to somebody about, well, what do you think happened there? Why did that drone come down? And usually you can trace that failure back to one of these 3 topics that I'm going to discuss in this clip. And it usually boils down to batteries, blades, or what I'll call boundaries, which is your area you're going to fly in. And I'll spend time on each of these topics to go through them, but all 3 of these topics are super critical because they are single points of failure in any drone or any flying vehicle that if they're not properly maintained or inspected, it's going to cause major problems for you. And honestly, the reason it's becoming much more important now is because once Part 107 becomes law on August 29th, anybody who passes that test is considered a pilot. And if you're a pilot, you're under the same guidance from the FAA that a commercial pilot would be. So for example, a pilot of a large plane, if you fly commercially, before the flight will get out of the plane, go down underneath, and they'll inspect the plane. He or she will look for landing gear issues, maybe look for oil or gas leaking from the filling sections of the plane. They'll look for maybe motor mounts to be tight, there won't be rivets loose, any obvious cracks, things like that. I'm sure there's 100 things they check that I'm missing, but they basically go down and make sure that that craft is airworthy before they ever take off. Even though mechanics have checked it and they've got extensive logs, they're ultimately responsible for the safety of that plane and the passengers that are in it. Once 107 becomes law and you pass that test, you're responsible for the drone. So there is no excuse to say, well, it crashed, maybe I missed something. That doesn't fly. So the FAA is going to hold you responsible for that. So I think it's super critical that responsible pilots would check that drone before it ever goes up. And some of the things I'm going to talk about are probably things in your pre-flight checklist already that you check, and that's great. But I'm doing this clip in case there are things you have missed, or maybe new pilots are coming into the hobby that don't give a lot of thought to this. It's easy to sort of take that drone out of the case because you're excited to fly, slap a battery in it, push the sticks forward and take off. And that's wonderful, and you can get away with that for a little bit of time, but over time, these issues could come back to haunt you. So I'll go through these individually. Hopefully they're constructive and you take it in that spirit. I don't want to come off as preachy. I make a lot of mistakes. I've crashed drones on a regular basis. Luckily, lately I haven't crashed a lot of drones, but there were periods of time where I've crashed drones because I've neglected some of these things, or I was a new flyer and did things I shouldn't do. What I'm trying to do is help other people to avoid those mistakes. So hopefully this clip is beneficial. I'll get into these 3 topics in a couple of seconds, so stay tuned. Okay, so this first section has to do with the batteries. Now, the battery is really the heart of the drone for so many reasons. It's the power plant that drives everything inside that drone, from the motors that spin that keep it elevated, to the control electronics that are talking to your controller to keep it on course or where you want to go, to the GPS coordinates that it's keeping track of where it's flying, whether it's sending a video signal back or not. So if there's anything at all that affects that battery or compromises the battery's ability to supply the right amount of current to the drone at that given moment, all kinds of bad things can happen. Worst case scenario, the battery fails and the drone falls from the sky. But less than dramatic, than that would be things like maybe the battery's not supplying the right amount of current, or the voltage drops a little bit, maybe just enough where the controller gets confused. You hear a lot about flyaways where the drones just take off like they have a mind of their own. That could be a low voltage condition in that drone that actually causes that problem. So the batteries are super critical, and they are a single point of failure. And again, if that battery can't supply the amount of current that's being demanded by the drone at that given moment, all kinds of bad things are going to happen. So the failures with batteries can fall in one of two categories, typically either physical or electrical, and I'll go through both of these. On the physical side of the house, things that can affect the battery's performance have to do with, cracks in the battery or physical damage to the battery. So you want to eyeball the battery every so often to make sure it's not cracked. You also want to spin it around, use a flashlight, and look in the end where the connections are. So on the P4, it's right on the bottom of the battery. The P3 is a little closer to the top, so there's less chance of getting debris in there. But with the P4, unfortunately, that battery, a lot of people will stand it up between chargings or when they're putting it in the drone. Heaven forbid they drop it in the grass and it lands on the end. You could get debris up inside that connector that may not be obvious. So if you're checking in there all the time for fuzz or foam or dirt, that'll help you make sure that the battery's getting fully charged, and better that you're not sliding a dirty battery into the drone and transferring some of that debris inside the drone. Because again, electrically, even though it can physically make a connection to power up that drone and make the connection to your controller, you may get it up there and it just tweaks a little bit, and all of a sudden that connection isn't as tight as it should be, and the voltage drops, and then all kinds of crazy things start happening. So the physicality of it's really important. Now, what I'd like to do is I protect the end of those batteries. So I'll use like electrical tape along the bottom to protect that connector when it's in its case, when it's not actually in the drone. They make battery guards you can apply there too, but if you just want to put the electrical tape on, that'll do a good job. I keep electrical tape in my kit just for that reason. But those are two things you want to check on a regular basis. Now, the electrical side of it, there are a couple of things you can do there. If you're looking at the screen now, you're actually seeing the DJI Go app, and in that app, it'll actually look at the battery. Now, the battery itself isn't a standard LiPo battery. Like, it's not a naked LiPo battery. It's called an intelligent battery for a reason. If you were to break open that case, DJI has actually built in a little controller board inside there, and that controller board has got intelligence built into it, that it controls the amount of current that's being delivered to the drone. It does all kinds of diagnostics across the battery cells that are inside of it. It helps prevent short circuits and fires breaking out. If you short out the battery, it'll take over control and won't allow it to burst into flames. So that controller card is the intelligence of the battery. The battery itself, from a physical perspective, isn't one big LiPo cell. It's actually a collection of cells. And if you're looking at the screen, you're seeing those cells up there. Those cells are charged, or the controller tries to charge those cells equally across all those cells, so that they're all about the same level. If you look at that screen on a regular basis before you take your bird up, you'll see that maybe one of those cells, because it isn't efficient, over time they get to be a little less efficient, one of those cells may not charge equally like the other cells do. So if you're looking across those, you want to make sure that all the cells are roughly charged about the same, and if they're not, there are a couple of tricks you can do to fix that. So one of the confusing points out there about LiPo cells is you'll hear people say, never run a LiPo cell dead, because if you run a LiPo cell dead, it could be gone for good. Like, you'll never be able to recharge that. The truth is, because of the controller card inside of that intelligent battery, a flight battery from DJI, they actually, if you drain it all the way to the point where it blacks out, it's still got about 8 or 10% of battery voltage in there, so it never allows you to really drain those batteries completely. But if you do drain it to the point where it blanks out, that resets that controller. So when you charge it again, it's going to reset all the parameters inside those LiPo cells, the history of the LiPo cells, and it'll charge them all equally. So if you do bring it up on the application and you look across those cells and you see one cell that's lower than the others, substantially lower than the others, do that reset procedure, because that'll give you new life for your battery. And again, you might not notice that. If you don't look at that screen, the battery voltage might be close enough where it'll take off, but all kinds of wacky stuff can happen if that in fact isn't charged equally across all those cells. You can also in that app look at how many times that battery's been charged. These batteries aren't forever. So as you use this thing more and you start charging that battery on a regular basis, you're going to see as it gets older, it doesn't hold its charge as long, and it may not actually charge all the cells equally. So it'll give you a lot of battery warnings, and I'm going to do a whole separate clip on sort of the battery Bible for the DJI stuff. But for now, suffice it to say that that screen is your best friend, because it lets you know exactly what's going on inside the battery. One other thing I forgot to mention on the physical side of the house is that even though DJI does a really good job of hearing physical clicks when you pop that battery into the casing, there have been occasions where you can actually get it in the casing or slide it into the drone and you'll hear the click, but not both of them are seated. Now, this is pretty rare, but if you don't have that thing fully seated in the drone, there is a chance when you get it up to altitude, if you bank hard or you start and stop hard, you could pop that battery out of its case. So what I'd like to do is when I slide the battery in, I look very closely to make sure the battery and the case are actually tied up against each other. Once I see those are tied up against each other, I know it's seated completely. And again, that's pretty rare, but you can imagine if the battery does pop out of the drone and it's got no power, it's coming down. So just a couple of things to check from a battery perspective that'll keep it safe and keep it flying for you. All right, so the second thing you want to keep an eye on are the blades. Now the blades should be obvious that they're a single point of failure on the drone, and if they fail, the drone comes down. Or at the very least, it's going to fly weird, right? It may go out of control for you. So the blades are super critical, and the blades are fairly delicate devices that are perfectly balanced to give that drone exactly what it needs to stay in the air. So there are a couple of things that I do with my blades to make sure that I'm not going to run into trouble. The first thing is I'm a little bit of a lazy guy, so I have a case where I can actually put my drone in it and the blades stay on it. The tendency would be to take it out of the case when I get to an exciting location and I'm all fired up about flying, pop a battery in it and take off. The danger there is that there's something wrong with the blades that I didn't notice. It may take off just fine, but get up to 300 feet and then something happens and I can't fix that. So I've conditioned myself now as part of the pre-flight checklist to actually physically take the blades off the copter and do a physical inspection of those blades. So I'll actually look at the top surface, I'll flip it over, look at the bottom surface, I'll look for specifically maybe deformations in the surface structure, I'll look for dings on the ends of the blades, I'll look for deposits, because if I'm flying in the air and I hit a bug, I may not know that. That bug debris is going to dry on the blade, and then the problem is because of the way those blades are balanced, if I've got a little bit more weight, and it doesn't have to be much, on this end of the blade's going to spin with an eccentric circle, so it's going to wobble in that motor mount. The challenge there is that the motor itself is going to have to work harder, which may cause a motor failure prematurely. So I want to make sure those blades are perfectly balanced. And the way I do that is after I physically inspected them, I've looked at the blades, I know there's no dings and no deformations, is I keep some sort of cleaning wipes with me. These are alcohol-based wipes, like the Clorox wipes that you use to clean a sink or whatever. You want to stay away from baby wipes because baby wipes typically have like aloe in it and some other chemicals that actually stay behind. The ones I use are the cleaning wipes that are alcohol-based, and once you wipe the blade and clean the blade, everything evaporates and nothing's left behind. But I clean those blades on a regular basis. That helps me get better use out of the blades, longer use out of the blades, and guarantees that there's nothing going to impact the ability of those blades to keep that drone up in the air. The second part of it is the physical attachment part of it. So on the P4, if you flip them over, you'll see inside that ring, there'll be 3 stanchions inside there that connect. And actually, when you put it down and twist it, they're the part that impact that base, that hold on to the base. You want to look very carefully to make sure that those 3 stanchions are attached in all 3 sections and there's no hairline cracks or there's nothing missing. I've had friends that have actually taken their blades off to do that inspection, and one of them was missing. It actually had cracked and fallen out. So they were flying with 2 of those connections, still flying the drone, still no obvious problems with it, but that was heading for failure because if that third one went or second one went, that thing's coming down. So definitely inspect that. In addition to that, you want to look very carefully at the mount itself. Now the mount really has 2 parts. There's the plastic part that mounts to the motor with a couple of screws holding it in there. Then there's spring metal underneath that should be in the up position. And when you push down, you know how to mount the blades. When you push down the blades and turn it a quarter of a turn, that spring metal is responsible for pushing that blade back up and fully seating it on that assembly. Over time, that spring metal, because you're pushing it on and pulling it off, gets fatigued and they get lazy and they'll actually lay down a little lower. The problem is that the blade's not being pushed up at the same force and it's not seated entirely in that mount, which could cause wobble in the blade, which could unseat a blade and have it fly off the drone. So what I like to do is I'll look at those on a regular basis and I'll gently, ever so gently, grab the end of that metal and pull it back slightly towards the shaft, and that'll actually add some of the spring back to it, so I'm sure that it's fully seated when it's in the installed position. Another thing you can do is when you change your blades, don't get lazy. You'll notice when you buy blades, they come with a new mounting assembly and they come with a new spring piece for underneath. Change those. I know it takes a couple extra minutes, but trust me, that metal will fatigue over time and you don't want to have that on your drone. So change that stuff out when you get those new blades. The last thing I'll say is that plastic piece can get fractured as well. So I always look very carefully to make sure there's no hairline cracks in that and I'm not missing a piece on the top. I'll compare one mounting kit to another mounting kit to see that all the pieces are there. Once that's done, the whole thing takes me about a minute. I put everything back on and I'm off and flying. Now, one other thing you may consider, and I haven't bought these yet, but I may buy a set of them just to do a review on them and see if they work. Those plastic pieces that the actual blade attaches to are now available as aluminum pieces. There's a company that makes them that look exactly like the ones that are on the drone. They weigh exactly the same as the plastic ones, but they're actual aluminum. So you can take off the plastic ones, put these aluminum ones on, and that's one less point of failure that you have to concern yourself with. Again, I haven't used them. They're a couple of bucks. I mean, $10, $15 for the set. I may buy those and do a review on them just to see how they are. But for my mind, I know I've complained a little bit about the P4's mounting system, and it hasn't failed on me, so I really shouldn't complain about it. I'm just worried as an engineer looking at that, thinking, On the P3, I had one shaft that was actually physically mounted to the motor. My propeller screwed onto that shaft, and it was a self-tightening propeller. So I really had only one point of connection inside there that could fail. With the P4, I have the motor, I have the actual spring metal, I have the mounting base, I have screws holding that together, and then I have a piece of plastic connecting to another piece of plastic. When I'm up in the air, flying fast, with the torque it takes to stop that, turn directions, dive, accelerate, I'm worried that plastic over time will have defects in it. So eliminating one of those points of failure by replacing with an aluminum piece might be the way to go. But again, it's up to you guys how you handle that. I'm just trying to give you a heads up on the blades. So that's all I had to say about the blades. Hopefully you guys are checking those already. I'm sure you are, otherwise you'd have a drone crashing out of the sky. But if you're not, add this to your pre-flight checklist. It takes you an extra minute or two to clean the blades, check those bases, and reinstall the blades. It'll eliminate a lot of the problems that can cause that drone to fall out of the sky. Okay, so the third section has to do with what I'll call boundaries. Now, I only use the word boundaries because I needed a third beak. Honestly, I have batteries, blades, and boundaries. But boundaries has to do with the area you're going to fly. So the location you're going to go to put the drone up, there can be hazards in that location that may not be apparent unless you actually do your homework. So I may be more conservative than most pilots. I'm sure a lot of you guys do exactly like I do. But before I ever put the drone up, before I even power the drone up, I'll walk the location. So I'll spend a little bit of time in the area that I'm going to fly, and I'm looking for a couple of things that may cause me problems. The first thing I'm looking for is typically trying to identify the tallest structure in the area, so that when I put the drone up, I have a rough idea of where those structures are. So if I start dropping down, I know I'm getting close to them. I know what kind of height I've got to be concerned about. The second part, which is really important to me, is in addition to the place I'm taking off, I want to identify at least one or two other areas where, heaven forbid, something happens with the drone where I got to put it back down quickly. I may not have the luxury of flying back to where I took off. So I want to find flat places that are safe, that aren't near people, that aren't near roads, that aren't near water, that I can actually land the drone in an emergency and go back and recover it. So I'm looking for that secondary location or the third location that in my head I can go, okay, I've got a problem on that side of the field. I can put it down over there and I know where it's going to land. So those are some basic things you do. You probably do the same thing, but those will keep your drone safe. I know that the drone itself has crash avoidance in the front. So many times I'm backing away from a scene, trying to get that perfect shot. Maybe I'm elevating or I'm coming down. I want to make sure I know what's behind me, and it's impossible to do that unless I've checked that location out before I put the drone up. The other thing that concerns me, and this is something that friends of mine have had this issue before, and it wasn't apparent to them until they actually had the drone fail because of it. And it has to do with the frequencies these drones use to communicate. Now, I've done a whole separate clip talking about the ISM band, which is the band that the actual drone communicates to the controller in. That band is an incredibly noisy band. There's a ton of stuff in that band that's competing for the attention of the drone. So you've got things like Wi-Fi in there, you've got smart meters in there, microwave ovens are in there, home phones. If you're using a cordless phone in your home, it's in that band. Bluetooth is in that band. Wi-Fi, I mentioned that earlier. So there's a lot of signals in there that when your controller's trying to talk to your drone, it's got to overcome those signals. Now, luckily, the DJI product is so smart that it's constantly scanning for the cleanest frequency, and it'll make the connection to the drone. And if this frequency gets busy and there's noise, it'll flip to another frequency and make a connection. So it's doing its due diligence to keep you connected to the drone. The only time that's not true is if you come in contact with a source that overrides the drone's ability to communicate with the controller. And that'll happen typically with like cell phone towers. And the thing that's interesting about cell phone towers for me is in the old days, you used to be able to identify a cell phone tower. It looked like a cell phone tower. So it was a big stick in the air, had a bunch of antennas on the top of it, and it was obvious that it was a cell phone tower. Nowadays, they've disguised them as pine trees and palm trees, and looking out in the field of a bunch of trees, you may not even notice that that particular tree is a cell phone tower. Hopefully, they're taller than the other trees, so it's pretty obvious to you. But what I'm getting at is, you don't have to get too close to that cell phone tower to have the power of that tower, the broadcast in that tower, the RF it's generating, override your controller's ability to talk to your drone. Now that can cause a couple of interesting problems. It may cause a loss of communication, which forces the drone to come back and land. If it's strong enough and the right frequency, it could cause that drone to drop like a stone out of the sky. And what's really interesting and scary is that it could be a matter of inches, where you're flying fine, 500 feet away from it, you go another 6 inches, you're now close enough where that overriding signal takes the drone out. So always be careful when you're flying. I'm sure you're doing this, but if you're not, always be careful to try and identify any kind of broadcast tower that's in the area and stay the hell away from it. So if I'm going out to a location, I don't care how beautiful it is, I don't care if the sun's setting and there's deer out in the field and the pine trees are beautiful and there's crashing waves, I'm not putting a drone up if there's a cell phone tower anywhere near that, because The drone's an expensive toy. I love flying it, and I want to fly it for a long time. And I think getting close to a cell phone tower where I don't know where those boundaries are is a really kind of a sketchy thing, kind of a dangerous thing. So just be aware of that. A lot of people don't know that you don't actually have to be right on top of the tower to have it affect the drone. So just be really careful about that. So that's really all I had. These three things, again, it was the batteries, the blades, and the boundaries. I hope this was helpful. And again, I hope I didn't come off preachy. I'm not intending to do that. As I mentioned earlier, I goof a lot. I've crashed drones over the years, and these are some of the reasons that my drones came out of the sky. I'm just trying to help you avoid those kind of pitfalls. So hopefully this has been helpful. We love doing these clips. If you guys are enjoying them, we'll keep doing them. Please comment below if you have any questions or concerns. You want to let me know something. We read those on a regular basis. Subscribe. Pass this around if your friends subscribe. Thumbs up are always good. That's encouraging for us. And again, it's been a lot of fun. So we'll see you soon. Thanks a lot for watching, and have a great day.